The world wondered when Donald Trump was elected, would the U.S. continue to honor the climate agreement that was reached in Paris? We have our best indication yet. The answer will likely be no. He selected Oklahoma Attorney General Scott Pruitt to lead the Environmental Protection Agency. A climate change denier, he's sued to stop almost every regulation that very agency has implemented in recent years. Climate change activists have a few words to describe the pick.
A total disaster.
Charlie Cray of Greenpeace says groups like his are preparing to fight the nominee every step of the way.
Their agenda can be delayed and obstructed in the courts and really by the American people, who once they see what's going on are not going to support attacks on regulations that, keep their air and their environment clean.
So last week, Breitbart.com published an article claiming that global warming was nothing but a scare and global temperatures were actually falling. Problem is, they used a completely unrelated video about La Nina with my face in it to attempt to back their point. Now, what's worse is that the U.S. Committee on Space, Science and Technology actually tweeted it out. Here's the thing. Science doesn't care about your opinion. Cherry picking and twisting the facts will not change the future, nor the fact, note fact, not opinion, that the Earth is warming. So let's break it down. Their first claim is that global land temperatures have plummeted by 1 degree Celsius since the middle of this year, the biggest and steepest fall on record. Now, that was based on one satellite estimate of global land temperatures, not a consensus. And second of all, land temperatures aren't an appropriate measure. The Earth is 70% water, and water is where we store most of our heat energy. So when you look at sea surface temperatures and you combine that with land temperatures, you actually get a record high for November of 2016. Their second claim, it can be argued that without El Nino, 2014 to 2016 would not have been record warm years. Now, you're taking a look at the Arctic sea ice melting here in this video from NASA. When you actually normalize the data, aka take out the El Nino spike in temperatures, 2015 and 2016 still come in as the warmest years on record. So that brings me to claim number 3. Many think that 2017 will be cooler than previous years. Now, it is typical, yes, for temperatures to drop in a post-El Nino environment, but certainly not to record lows. If that claim was correct, we would have had global record lows all over the last century. We haven't seen that since 1911. The last time we fell below the 20th century average was in 1976, and guess what? That was directly following the 1974-1975 strong El Nino. So next time you're thinking about publishing a cherry-picked article, try consulting a scientist first. And to all my fellow scientists out there, let's make the facts louder than the opinions.
Parts of the southern United States recovering and cleaning up after powerful storms last week. 4 children were injured in Alabama when a tornado hit their daycare center. In a nearby town, that same storm killed 3 people. The storm moved through 4 states, spawning tornadoes along the way. Tornadoes are among the most destructive types of storms. These twisters of wind have killed more than 1,000 people in the U.S. over the past 2 decades. A new study shows tornado outbreaks are becoming more frequent.
Joplin, Missouri, May 2011. A tornado 1.5 kilometer wide rips through the city. Winds top 320 kilometers per hour.
You see people just walking around stunned.
Businesses, homes, even a hospital destroyed. 158 people dead. In the end, damage was estimated at nearly $3 billion. Just weeks earlier, Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Worried about the stadium, guys.
65 people were killed in a tornado that carved a path through nearly 130 kilometers. It was part of what was dubbed a super outbreak, one of the worst tornado outbreaks in U.S. history. Over the course of 3 days, the southeastern United States saw 349 separate tornadoes.
I've got to say, I've never seen devastation like this. It is heartbreaking.
A study published this month in the journal Science says these so-called tornado clusters are becoming more common. A cluster is when a storm forms 6 or more tornadoes. 50 years ago, there were 40 outbreaks per year. Last year, there were 80, double the number. The authors of the study don't know why, but say it's a trend. They add it does not appear to be linked to climate change. What we do know is how tornadoes form. They form when hot, humid air, typically from the sea, meets dry, cold air, typically from the poles. The hot air rises and the cold air gathers underneath. That causes thunderclouds to form. The two air masses begin rotating around one another and a funnel appears. When it touches ground, it's officially a tornado. Tornadoes are measured on the enhanced Fujita scale, going from 0 to 5. And EF0 is relatively weak with winds between 105 and 137 kilometers per hour. They cause minimal damage. On the other hand, an EF5 tornado is extremely strong, with winds ranging from 320 to 500 kilometers per hour. These winds are strong enough to pull entire houses off their foundations. While tornadoes can form all over the world, the United States is most prone by far, especially an area known as Tornado Alley in the country's Midwest.
While the number of tornado outbreaks may be increasing in the U.S., the total number of tornadoes actually dropped this year by a lot. U.S. weather agencies track this data. In 2016, they counted just over 200 tornadoes. That is a drastic drop. You can see the tally since the year 2000. There are usually around 1,000 or more tornadoes every year in the United States, but not in 2016. Let's piece all of this together with one of the most respected voices on climate in the United States. Bob Henson is a weather and climate blogger with Weather Underground. Bob, welcome. It seems the number of storms may be dropping, but the severity of them might be getting worse. Is that true?
That's right. There's been some interesting research and culminating in this Science article that was mentioned, looking at when tornadoes happen, how often they happen, and especially how they're clustering into outbreaks. Now, this is something that has always happened. Tornadoes have typically occurred in scattershot method. You might get one or two tornadoes and a few storms, and then every so often you get one of these outbreaks that can be as many as dozens of tornadoes, even once in a while hundreds. And these outbreaks, it appears, are actually having more tornadoes within them, but then we're getting increasingly quiet periods in between the outbreaks. So it's as if you're taking the total number of tornadoes and munching them together into bigger clusters with bigger gaps in between. And it's not exactly clear why that's happening, but it seems to be a pretty significant sustained trend now.
A moment ago, we were talking about the two horrific tornadoes in the United States. Back in 2011, that year, tornadoes claimed more than 550 lives. Let's look at a graphic here showing just how rare that is. Usually that number is around 50 or so. What have we learned, Bob, from tornadoes and storms in general that can save lives?
Well, one thing we do know is that most people are most likely to be hurt or killed in these very, very big outbreaks. So there's been a lot of attention to how to communicate the message even a couple of days ahead, that coming up, you should be aware that, say, a couple of days from now is the potential for a big outbreak. In a lot of parts of the United States, especially in the South, school systems are now closing the morning of a big outbreak, so the kids won't be caught in a school bus or in unsafe schools. So there's been a real growth in awareness, and I think that's helped a lot. Unfortunately, there's a double-edged sword here, because if people have advance notice and they see a storm coming and they may think it's going to bring a bad tornado, say in an hour, they may be more tempted to get in their cars. And there's real danger there, because you can literally have traffic jams. And that has actually happened, especially in the Oklahoma City area over the last couple of years. So we need to pay attention to how to get the message out, and especially how to make sure people are in safe places.
The study I referenced says the increase in tornado outbreaks may not be linked to climate change, but what are some of the changes we're seeing right now that are linked to climate change?
Well, that's an open question and a very interesting one. The assumption going forward, and this is based on models and theory, is that as the atmosphere warms up near the ground, we're going to have more instability, because the warm, moist air near the surface and cold air aloft tends to cause rising motion and severe thunderstorms. So the thinking is maybe later in the 20th century, we'll be more likely to have perhaps more tornadoes. Now, what wasn't expected is that the wind shear that we get, where you have low-level winds from one direction, upper-level winds from another, that's what gives storms their spin. That's what's been increasing in the last 50 years, and scientists didn't really see that coming. This is a new and important finding from the study in the past week. So it's not clear whether this is happening because of climate change or perhaps just maybe a multi-decadal variability, and perhaps it'll switch back to lower wind shear going forward. But what's happened appears to be a little bit different than what we think is going to happen related to climate change down the line.
So Bob, if anyone knows the answer to my next question, it would be you. Now what? What can we do with the information that we have that storms seem to be getting worse for whatever the reason?
Well, what we can do, I think, is simply be aware that when there is an outbreak, when we do have these especially dangerous situations, there's even more potential than there was a few decades ago to have many, many tornadoes, dozens. And so those are the situations where you have to be aware sometimes for hours on end. One location can get multiple tornadoes. People just need to be persistent and sensible, be where you have shelter, take the storm seriously, and simply be prepared because we do have better and better notice, often several days ahead of the outbreaks. And when there is a particularly bad tornado, we often can tell, say, an hour away, as much as an hour, that bad tornado is coming. So certainly the science is better and better on warnings and awareness, but you still can have terrible death tolls. We saw in the Joplin tornado you mentioned, 2011, that killed more than 100 people. Deadliest tornado in close to 100 years in the United States. So there is still the potential for catastrophe. So awareness is critical, and we can make a difference by making sure our warning systems are well supported and by people taking action.
Awareness and hopefully talking to experts like yourself will make a difference. Bob Henson, thank you so much.
Just make it to spring. It's been the motto here on John East's farm for months, since his pastures withered, leaving 300 head of hungry cattle.
Make it to spring till grass gets green and the drought will be a history.
East's family has worked this farm for 3 generations. He says never in his lifetime has he seen the land this dry for this long.
I'd hate to wake up one morning and have to sell this and get rid of this stuff and no longer have it. It'd break my heart.
But the drought is leaving Alabama cattle farmers with few options. Many have already given up their cows, unable to grow enough feed. East says he'll have to do the same if the drought continues past May, when his stored hay runs out.
It would be a desperate measure, but if you don't have anything to feed them, you don't have anything else to do with them. You have to get rid of them.
The forecast, though, is dire. Meteorologists predict a dry winter ahead. Some climate experts say this may be a sign of climate change.
So I think what you see with climate change is you're seeing more intense events, colder colds, hotter hots, wetter wets, drier dries. All these things accumulate. And so in that sense, I think that you could say that this is part of a pattern.
And the signs are obvious. This is Lake Purdy near Birmingham in 2001. Now it looks like this.
In a normal year, where would we be up to in water right now?
We would have drowned by now.
Oh, wow.
We would be standing, the water would be probably at least 10, 12 feet above our heads.
Wow.
The waterways of Alabama are among the most biodiverse of the entire United States, making this site especially troubling. This group of snails had gathered to reproduce, only to die when the water receded. So this drought is endangering their entire next generation.
When you see dead fish, when you see dead mussels, and you know that some of these species are already on endangered species lists, you have to worry about these impacts.
Then there are the forest fires, unprecedented in their intensity in Alabama.
Unusual fires, fires that get up into the crown of the forest, which is very unusual for the southeastern United States.
What remains is a parched landscape and an uncertain future. But there is hope that a lush Alabama, as its people remember, will return. Heidi Jo Castro, Al Jazeera, Birmingham, Alabama.
Another result of climate change that is pretty devastating are these retreating glaciers. When these glaciers retreat, the land that was once held up by the ice has no choice but to tumble, and many times those landslides end up in the water, and they create a tsunami as a result. So some seismologists were doing some research on a particular tsunami that happened in October of 2015 in Alaska. They say a mountainside near a glacier collapsed into a fjord in southeastern Alaska that created a wave that reached, get this, a height of 500 feet. Now, fortunately, this was in a remote area because in comparison, the devastating tsunami that hit Japan in 2011 was only 130 feet. So kind of big difference there, right? Experts say that many glaciers are retreating, some at an astonishing rate, and there's concern that another tsunami that comes from a retreating glacier could be really dangerous, especially if a cruise ship was nearby.
The first Arctic blast of the season is sweeping across much of the country. Parts of the upper Midwest are under a blizzard warning. Heavy snowfall overnight made driving dangerous in Colorado.
Sections of North Dakota and Minnesota have more than a foot of snow on the ground. Temperatures are plunging across the Great Plains, and even in parts of the South, frigid conditions will settle over much of the country through the week as cold air moves from west to east. Omar Villafranca is in Bismarck, North Dakota, where government forecasters are warning about dangerous wind chill. Omar, good morning.
Good morning. People here in Bismarck, North Dakota are waking up to snow drifts and single digits. There is more snow in the forecast, and the bad news is there's more wind on the way. Wind gusts of up to 60 miles an hour have made it almost unbearable. And with the temperature still dropping, people are getting ready for the worst.
Blinding snow blanketed Boulder, Colorado overnight, clogging roads, causing crashes, and forcing emergency crews to help out. North Dakota is no stranger to harsh winter weather, although it's technically still fall. Nearly all of I-94 stretching across the state is closed, leaving the normally busy highway eerily silent. In Minot, the international airport grounded all flights Tuesday. Whiteout conditions in nearby Grand Forks made driving nearly impossible. This stop sign marked the only spot of color in a sea of white. In the east, in Douglas County, Minnesota, heavy winds whipped snow across the roads. Bismarck, the capital of North Dakota, was buried in nearly a foot of powder. People braved single-digit temperatures to try and clear their doorways and dig out driveways. Blizzard conditions made walking a tedious task and driving even harder.
How is the visibility? Visibility in certain areas is down to 0. Right now in this area, because we've got structures and trees, it's not so bad, but when you get out in the open, it's really reduced.
So you couldn't even see the car in front of you?
There are times where it's absolutely like that, yeah.
This is only a 3-foot snowdrift, but we have seen 7-foot snowdrifts in this part of the state. Snowplow truck drivers are staying very busy, but still there are more than 450 miles of North Dakota interstate that are still shut down.
Omar, thank you.
Entonces antes vivíamos con la caza y la pesca, recolectando y pescando pescado. Solamente nuestro alimento era eso, pero ahora no tenemos.
Ya se han ido los hombres lejos, los babos cuidamos aquí, aunque sea, pero mujeres cuidamos aquí las babos. No hay ni trabajo, por eso se han ido lejos a trabajar. Nuestros esposos se han ido a trabajar, llega, se ha ido también. Nomás llegas, los solitos, nomás mujeres aquí estamos viviendo.
Cyclone Varda has crossed Chennai, wreaking havoc, leaving a trail of uprooted trees and even electric poles. According to the National Disaster Management Authority, in all 10 people have been killed. The cyclone has now weakened, but heavy to very heavy rainfall and gusty winds will lash Chennai, Kanchipuram and Tiruvallur for the next few hours. Now, Defence Forces, the Coast Guard, the NDRF will resume rescue operations. Many arterial roads have been blocked after the flooding. Schools and colleges and offices have also been closed for a second day. Maya Sharma now joins us for the very latest from Chennai. Maya, so it seems that at least the worst is over for now, but now the challenge, of course, will be to get Chennai and Tamil Nadu back on the roads and back to normal.
Back on the roads really is the channel. Yes, the sun is peeping out. There is blue sky available to be seen, but you can see just a section of the devastation that has hit the city over here. We've got trees down, we've got power down, cable lines, internet lines down. This entire section of area here in Mylapore and Colony is actually blocked off in many ways, and the city really trying to clean up ever since the devastation wrought by Cyclone Varda on Monday evening.